This is Outrageous History. Hello, I'm Ernest Granson, and welcome to Outrageous History. In the late fall of 2022, Vincent van Gogh's painting Orchard with Cypresses, at that time owned by the Paul Allen estate, was auctioned off to an anonymous buyer for $117.2 million US, the highest price paid so far for a Van Gogh painting. Considering that Van Gogh's innovative post-Impressionist techniques in the late 1800s were too radical for many in the art community at that time, it's extraordinary just how that point of view had shifted. But maybe it isn't so shocking, because there's a very good reason why those paintings became so well known and expensive. And that's mainly because of the effort of Johanna or Jo van Gogh-Bonger, wife of Theo van Gogh. Vincent and his brother Theo were extremely close and died within a year of each other. For Jo, it became her life's work to open the world's eyes to Vincent's as yet unrecognized talents. Today, we have with us Hans Luijten, author of Jo van Gogh-Bonger, the woman who made Vincent famous. Hans is a researcher at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam and has also authored several other Van Gogh-related books. Welcome to Outrageous History today, Hans.
Thank you very much.
Well, you know, Hans, with Vincent van Gogh's worldwide fame, it's easy to forget that, like for many other artists, no one really knew about him or his paintings in the early stages of his career. As your biography of his sister-in-law, Jo van Gogh-Bonger, points out, it was really her persistence that propelled his paintings into the world of art dealers, galleries, and museums, not to mention the general public. But judging by her early life, she seemed quite unlikely to be the person to do this. So what do you think was it that drove her to do this?
Well, she wanted to finish the work that her husband Theo would have done had he stayed alive. And for decades, she single-mindedly pursued her goal of achieving recognition of Van Gogh's artistic oeuvre, doing everything in her power to establish his reputation all over the world. And it's thanks to her great love of his art and her unshakable faith in Van Gogh's talent, and of course her own energetic persuasion over the years, that she eventually succeeded. Jo was able to stand her ground in a male-dominated world, let's not forget that, and take responsibility for both the stewardship of Van Gogh's work and its dissemination. And as the guardian of the legacy, she was the foundation on which the later Van Gogh cult was built.
Well, according to your biography, her family was her upbringing was fairly normal for that era, and her family position. Her parents were relatively educated, and so was she. The family took part in cultural activities, and she spent some time in England where she took in theater productions and visited prominent art galleries. So would you say that she possessed some of the basics for a career as an art dealer, which she essentially became that?
Yeah, but it took some time. Of course, in her education, the basis was there. She was fluent in Dutch, of course, in German, in French, and in English. She did, after her secondary school, she did 3 English exams in Holland, state exams. And after that, she was a teacher at girls' schools, twice in Holland. And that made it possible for her later in her life to correspond with all these art handlers in all these languages. That was an advantage for her to be able to do that. And of course, the upbringing included lots of literature, theater going, concerts. Her father was a quartet player on a violin, and that gave her a good cultural background. But it took some time for her to understand what the art world was about. And that was Theo, of course, in those 2 years that they were together in Paris, that brought her into that world.
Well, she had a few fleeting relationships with a couple of young men while she was working as a teacher, but it was when her brother Andreas, who lived in Paris, introduced the whole Bonger family to Theo van Gogh that the gears were set in motion for Joe's eventual total involvement. But that didn't happen right away, did it? Because Theo wasn't necessarily her first choice for a relationship. Maybe you can describe that stage in her life.
Yeah, it took some time. She was very much in love with a student in medicine here in Holland, but he was a bit cold to her, and we haven't mentioned all these wonderful documentation that we have in the museum. We don't not only have hundreds of letters, vice versa, we have account books, we have diaries, we have photographs, and all kind of eyewitness things. So if you take that in consideration, you can understand how she slowly moved towards Theo, and that took some time, really, because how could they know each other? How could they learn to understand what were their goals in life? And it was through Andries, her brother, that she gradually got to know more about Theo, and Vincent, of course, too, because in the very first letter that Vincent wrote to Jo, he already mentioned his brother Vincent. So from the very first start, Jo was well aware of the very close bond between these two brothers.
Yeah, and speaking of Andreas, just to take a slight detour, her older brother and Joe seemed to have a special sister relationship. What kind of influence did he have on her?
A great influence. It was a real role model for her, because he read a lot of literature, not only English but French too. And yeah, she learned lots of things from him, and she got more self-confidence, because if you look in her diary, she starts when she was 17. She was insecure, and she becomes more and more a woman of the world, you can say that, through her correspondence with Andries and her talks with him, and that gave her a lot of self-confidence. So he was a very important part of her upbringing.
Now, the young doctor, Eduard Stumpf, seemed to be her first serious relationship. And then when she finally realized that any kind of commitment from Stumpf was not going to materialize, Joe made that decision that completely changed her life. What happened at that time?
Yeah, it was a very big, great move for her, because Amsterdam is a city, but if you compare it with Paris, and with all these things going on over there, and then especially Theo was, of course, an art dealer, and his house was full of people who we know now as great painters, just like people like Paul Gauguin, Émile Bernard, Toulouse-Lautrec. They came in his apartment, and Jo was all of a sudden part of that too. And don't forget that in those years, Vincent lived in the south of France. So every now and then, there came crates full of paintings and drawings in Paris. And Jo and Theo together opened these things. And just as I said earlier, she had a faith in his talent. And they must have talked every day for hours, Theo and Jo, together with these young painters in their environment, about Van Gogh's art. So slowly she became more and more involved in understanding how the system worked and how she could talk and find the right words for discussing art as well as literature or other art things.
Well, Jo was quite content with her life with Theo over those 2 years or so of marriage, but there was much turmoil for Theo as his brother Vincent was gradually deteriorating emotionally and mentally and physically, followed shortly after by Theo's own serious health and mental breakdowns. Can you describe that period of their lives?
Yeah, that was of course difficult. And Jo became also part of the correspondence with Vincent. So Jo did not only read all these letters Vincent wrote to Theo, but she became part of it too. And she wrote to him first in Dutch and then slowly in French. But there was a lot of concern with Vincent, of course, because the moment they got engaged, that was the other day, Theo had to go to Uil by train because Vincent had cut off part of his ear. So from the very moment on, these concerns were in their system. And Theo didn't have a good health too. So slowly and slowly, it went wrong. And that's very moving to see what impact this had on Jo, of course, because they had their first son born in January 1890. Vincent came back from Saint-Rémy, from the asylum, was a few days in Paris, and then went to Dr. Gachet in Auvers-sur-Oise, some 30 kilometers north of France. So Jo, that was the first time Jo saw him. And she said, I thought I would see a very sick person, but if I compared Vincent with Theo, I thought Vincent was much stronger bodily and mentally. So the concern for Jo was great too, and within 6 months, Theo completely collapsed. He collapsed. It was terrible to see if you read the medical report of Theo what happened with him. I would not advise you to read it because it's not funny literature. You must have seen that in the biography.
What do you feel that was a hereditary condition in the Van Gogh family?
It could be. Lots of people in the family quarreled with diseases and had a hard time because they said, we were not well equipped enough for the real life. That's what one of the sisters said, because we have also hundreds of letters of the family members, father and mother to Theo and the sisters. And so if you compare that too, and you have that as a kind of background, you understand that lots of people had a hard time in their lives. And it was never good enough for them, because of course they were children of a preacher man, and God has given you talents, so you must use those talents to show the world that you can make it in this time. And that was hard for a lot of people.
That seems like a complicated family situation there. After Theo's death, Jo realized she would be responsible for managing the legacy of the two brothers, which included hundreds of Vincent's artworks. In the biography, you say that a fellow French post-Impressionist painter and writer, Émile Bernard, told Jo that she had a fortune and not to spoil it, a double fortune, a fortune in glory, a fortune in money. Do we have an accurate estimate as to how many paintings and drawings that Jo was left to deal with?
She had hundreds, both of paintings and of drawings. If you look back, she had an account book too. She not only sold all these paintings and drawings through all kinds of exhibitions, and some exhibitions were only show, and other were also works sold. So in those 35 years, she sold around 250 works of Vincent. That's roughly said half of what was left. So when the engineer, her son Vincent, when he gave his part of the collection at the Van Gogh Museum, to the Van Gogh Museum in the 60s. That was the half of it, because the legacy, Jo owned half and her son would own half. But of course, he was only 1 year old. So Jo had, roughly said, she could do with half of the legacy what she wanted. And because her goal was to give recognition to Van Gogh and make him more known to the world, she did all these selling things on purpose, of course. And she preferred selling to public institutions and musea, of course. But slowly on, all these works came first, like a snowball effect in the Netherlands, but then to Berlin too, and to Paris too, and to America and to England. Mm-hmm. So she built this slowly up, not flooding the market, but do this in a very strategic way. And that's very interesting to see. So in the biography, I'm not only saying when this happened and where it happened, but also how it happened and why it happened. So you can see in all these documents really good how her strategy was. And that's very remarkable. And she was tenacious, and she had a lot of perseverance in achieving this goal.
Right, and that was going to be my question, because she had this responsibility for not only selling, but for organizing and helping to organize numerous exhibitions. And considering her lack of confidence and practical knowledge of the business originally, that would have been that personality trait that enabled her to accomplish all of this. Her perseverance,
and with help, of course. You used a lot of intermediaries to help her, and that were in the beginning young artists here in Holland who helped her to organize the first exhibitions. And later she moved to Berlin, where Paul Cassirer was, and Gaston Bernheim in Paris, and Johannes de Bois here in Holland. And they got all kinds of works in commission and tried to sell them for Jo. Of course, they had a lot of profit from that too, but Jo profited in the same way, because they could help her with the dissemination of the work.
But before she started to earn that kind of income from the sales, how would she have earned her income, prior to being successful at that? Considering that she lost a husband.
She had a pension here in Holland for 10 years.
Oh.
So there was a guest house. There were all kinds of people staying there, because she lived in an environment here in Holland where a lot of artists were, writers, and also art critics. So that was very well chosen. And not only the income of the pension people gave her that support, but also all these people around her gave her a platform to reveal the art of Vincent. And we have talked up till now only about the art, but one of her great things in life, that too, was that she, for the very first time, made an edition of the letters Vincent wrote to Theo, to his brother. And that was very important too. Often people ask me, what would have been the case if we did not have all these letters of Vincent? It's a huge correspondence, and that's such a beautiful and important ego document, of course, because through his letters you can understand what was his drive in this world and in his life, and what he aimed with his art, and his struggle in life, of course, and the courage he had in accomplishing what he did. He was 10 years an artist. If you see what he achieved in those 10 years, it's unbelievable.
Right. In a way, there's irony in that while Jo undertook the task of organizing Vincent's letters, to Theo because she wanted to absorb as much information about her late husband as she could.
Mhm.
She also said that as she read the letters, she became just as inspired by Vincent's own thoughts. And what do you think it was about those letters that so captivated her?
Yeah, they are so strong, and you can see. Sometimes we say a man's got to do what a man's got to do. Vincent was convinced in what he did, and lots of people, they know these terrible film movies and films that you see him as a kind of agitated uh, lunatic working on his canvas. But if you look at those letters, you can see that he worked in campaigns, and he knew what he was doing, and he did it first things after another. And the drawing was very important for him. So you can see his poetics in a way, and his unbelievable drive in life to do what he had to do. And that's really remarkable. And after people were able to read his struggle and his perseverance too in life, they understood more what he aimed with his art, and that was a very important encouragement, of course.
Yeah, the letters reveal quite a different image than the general public has even now.
Yes,
Now,
that's true.
although Jo was devoted to the memory of her husband, she did wind up with several other relationships in the years after his death, including with two painters by the name of Isaac Israels and Johann Cohen Ghost-Chock. And he would become her second husband. How did that relationship turn out?
It took some time for Jo to understand what happened. All her illusions, of course, were broken there in Paris. And she was 28 years old then. Don't forget that. So you see in her diary when she's 30, she says, "This beautiful body of mine, what will happen with it? What will go on?" So slowly she gets a lot of sympathy for Isaac Israels, a very successful young painter here in Holland. And she often visited him at his studio here in Amsterdam. And slowly they became, she fell in love, and they had a good time together. And she felt at ease with him, and he understood her, and he understood, of course, the aims of Vincent. So I can understand that was part of her life too. But all her life, it was Theo also who was in the back of her head. That's remarkable too. So I used the title for my Dutch biography, Alles voor Vincent, everything for Vincent. But also, it also responds and echoes everything for Theo too, because working on Vincent kept her close to the man who she ultimately loved most, of course. And you can see that's why she was so close with the whole Van Gogh family until the last days of her life. She felt a Van Gogh, and that's important to realize too.
And Johann, her second husband, had his own issues, I guess you could put it that
Yeah,
way. And she was widowed for a second time.
Yeah, very early. He died when he was 38 years. So Jo was widowed the second time, indeed. But he helped her a lot. He was a good art critic. And the major exhibition Jo made, that was in 1905 here at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. That was the real highlight in her life, because there were almost 500 works of Van Gogh on display. And that was a very important moment for her. And she was very satisfied too in the success it had. She had to organize everything. She had to rent the rooms in the museum. She had to take care of everything, and she did a very good job in making that successful. And afterwards, you can see that the prices were getting much higher than before.
Now there's another aspect to Jo's life which usually isn't mentioned, I suppose, because the Van Gogh connection is so overwhelming. But Jo became highly involved in the women's emancipation movement of the late 1800s and early 1900s, which led to her intense interest in socialism as well. She was quite serious about that, wasn't she?
Really, really, and also for voting rights for everyone, also for women. So this is a very important second way of making her life complete. She was a very convinced social democrat, and she struggled her whole life in making better positions for, of course, the poor people and the working class people, because together with Theo, she was convinced that not only artists were struggling and giving the best of their lives, but that the same was for the labor man, of course. So she did a great job there too, and people didn't know that here in Holland. So I get a lot of response on that level too. And you see, when she was for 3 years in America, she's going to see the speeches of Trotsky over there too, and she was very enthusiastic about it because she thought, yeah, maybe there can be a better world than all these different classes we have up till now.
I think it should also be noted that while Jo spent most of her adult life immersed in broadening knowledge of Vincent's works, she was also deeply devoted to caring for her son, who was also named Vincent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
And how did that relationship work out throughout Vincent's younger life and then in Vincent's later stages?
She gave him a very good education, and she was very well aware of modern upbringing, theories, etc. That was remarkable. You can see that in every way. And later on, yeah, he became an engineer, and he wanted to make his own living, and he did that too. But where Vincent went, Jo went too. So they were very close connected. And yeah, of course, he incorporated Theo too. Vincent was not 1 year old when Theo died. So Jo wanted to give him, wanted to make a perfect boy of him. Sometimes too close, sometimes, yeah. Later on, he wrote a diary too, and he said, in those 2 years in America, maybe she could have more understood that she must have let me go more with my wife. She was so close to him. But the upbringing was good in that way that after Jo's death in 1925, it was Vincent that took over the same role that his mother had in promoting Vincent too. So especially after the Second World War, he traveled all over the world and gave lectures and lent all these precious works too. So he continued her work, and that's very remarkable and beautiful to see too.
Well, Hans, the English version of your book was released this past fall of 2022, while the original Dutch version was published in 2019, I think. Now, the two versions are the result of more than 10 years of research on your part. When and why did you decide to make such a commitment?
I think her role in the whole reputation history is very important. And of course, all the attention was first given to Vincent and to Theo. And if you work in the vault of the museum and you see all these beautiful documents, I thought I must give her the place that she deserves in history, and for many reasons. And showing the response now, lots of people say, why didn't we know this earlier? Because it was a very her tenacity and perseverance were essential in building up that reputation. I think she was the ideal promoter of Van Gogh, if you look back.
Well, Hans, I really thank you so much for constructing this essential slice of history. Before we go, we should mention that the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. And as part of the celebration, the museum is featuring an exhibition named Choosing Vincent, Portrait of a Family History. What can visitors expect to see?
We show the beautiful collection that's still, of course, part of everything we have now. Not only by Vincent, but also during his lifetime, Vincent and Theo changed a lot of works. So the fact that we have Paul Gauguin and Bernard and Guillaume and Pissarro in our collection is thanks to that. And they had a large collection of Japanese prints, reproductions from magazines, and we show that too. So we see the role of Jo, we see the role of Vincent, and we see the making of this wonderful museum collection that was once a family collection.
Well, once again, Hans, we appreciate your taking time out to talk to us again. And I thank all of you for tuning in. Remember, for online information about this and other podcast topics, as well as more information about our authors and historians, log on to www.outrageoushistory.com. Outrageous History is produced by Northern Flicker Media.